Hey guys, Stamina here. I wanted to make a video on what I believe is effective practice. Now, this doesn't have to be 100% perfect for everybody, but I think for a lot of teams, this will be a big help. And I think it's something that North America in general struggles with is really understanding like what effective practice is. Everybody understands that you're supposed to do a few basic things, but I don't think everybody actually does those things well. So basically, I have four levels of practice. I have theory, I have dry running, I have scrimming, and I have review. Now, this is only tailored towards Counter-Strike. There are other things about practice that are important, such as communication and having team talks and stuff like that, but I don't think that's necessary for this video. This is specifically about Counter-Strike. So within these four levels, we're going to start with theory. So theory is really important because theory crafting is the idea that you are going into a server, thinking of ideas, and then thinking about how they can be practical, and then using them, right? Theory crafting cannot just be the in-game leader, as I have noted here. Everybody needs to theory craft. If each person on your team is a part of the theory, they're going to feel more comfortable doing things, and they're going to think that they have a fair opportunity to show ideas that they like. So they're going to be more inclined to use your ideas if you're using theirs. You know, that's just human nature, right? Another thing is you want to try to think outside of the box. A lot of people think, okay, how can we execute a bomb site? We can throw this smoke, this smoke, this smoke, and this smoke, and then we're going to flash and go out. But they don't think about what happens if what if they're stacked on the bomb site? Like, how are we going to approach that? And then if they do think about that, sometimes they won't think about what if they're playing retake? What is our protocol for retake? So that's something that you need to try to do as well. So let me give an example of that. I'm going to go into game here. And I'm going to show like an example of like a protocol that many teams might have in theory. So let's say like you do like a Halls pop. Let's say you do a Halls pop on Inferno. Or actually, let's say you go B on Inferno, rather. Sorry, Halls pop wouldn't be practical here. Let's say you go B on Inferno and you do a full execute. You smoke spawn, you smoke coffin, you molly everything out, right? And you take the bomb site and you realize, oh, nobody's here, okay? And you've never experienced this before, right? Then, once you're reviewing that day of practice or whatever it might be, you're going to realize, okay, we need a protocol for when they're playing retake. So a common protocol that some teams might have is to take backhaul control, right? But you know that since they're playing retake, they are probably in backhaul. So how could you go about it? So some teams will have a basic little like flashbang such as this that will blind anybody playing in backhaul, so that if they're holding from here, they'll be blind, as well as holding from up here. And so then what they'll try to do is once they get the bomb plant down, they'll get a couple of guys here, and when they hear the enemies trying to retake, they'll throw that flash and have a few guys fight so that they're able to fight off the retake. So now they have a part of the map that they didn't have before. But if you were just simply fighting like one person pillar a new box and you kill them and then now you're in like a 4 versus 3, you don't necessarily need that extra map control, right? So that is a protocol that you would want to make sure that you would theory craft for your team. Now, this is going to scale to every single map, and there's going to be situations on every single map that you can do this on. So another thing about theory is you're going to want to use your resources. There's guys like Nard out here making really great content. You can see videos on TikTok and YouTube all the time, depending on how your algorithm is set up. And obviously there's pro demos that you can review. People underestimate the value of just watching demos and watching other people play and taking things from them. You don't have to take things from other people one for one. That's where people get this like, they get like the whole nerd out here IGL. That's kind of like a term that people have created in NA that I've at least heard. People that literally just take a strat, put it into their play, and they run it one for one every time, no changes. I think that's poor execution, but in theory, it's not horrible. It's just that you need to tweak it a little bit. So, for example, if you take a strat from somebody else, whether it be a pro demo or TikTok, think about how your team defaults, and think about how you could be anti-stratted if you just went into that strat every single time. And then you can add that strat to the end of a default that your team already has, and then you are less predictable. So that's a good way of looking at it like that. So that's kind of the idea behind theory. I know I kind of went through that relatively quick, but I think theory is kind of the easiest part to understand. So then we'll talk about dry running. So I also mentioned use your resources. There's a lot of resources out there right now for dry running. Prac.com has a really good mod you can get for your practice servers, and they have .dry run. It's a really nice little command. Practice mode, which is also through .host, which is like the most popular thing in NA. Practice mode also has like a .dry run command as well. And although Refrag does not have a dry run mode, depending on the type of dry run you're doing, whether it's just from set positions or if it's out of spawn, it could be beneficial for you. So make sure that you have your resources. Some of these are free, some of these cost money, but there's something for everybody. So, and then the next point is you're gonna want to make it game-like. This is something that was always screeched to me when I played basketball and football growing up. My coaches always like to say like, okay, you're just going through the motions, you're doing this lazy, do it game-like. And so when you do things game-like, you are going to actually feel the practice. You're going to feel comfortable doing everything that you're doing, right? So I also mentioned here, if you have a coach, have them use utility so your protocols stay intact. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say you're doing an A execute on Inferno, right? And your goal is to smoke Arch, and your goal is to smoke Moto, and then you're going to molly pit and go up lane, okay? A lot of teams can understand that. They can come here, throw the smoke, come here, smoke Arch. They can have a guy back here, throw a flash for lane, and then they can all swing out and molly pit and run up site, and then maybe have like some flashes for pit. But what happens when you get mollied, right? A lot of teams don't think about that. So what you can do is, if you're dry running a strat and you created a protocol in your theory for when you get mollied, and maybe your protocol is a stop. Okay, everybody stop for a second, wait, and then we'll get a pit flash once we're ready to go. One guy plays anti-flash while we're waiting, and then as soon as we're ready, we go. When you're dry running, you can dry run it without the Molotov, but also you're going to want to dry run sometimes with maybe your coach or somebody mollying lane for you and flashing lane and even looking to fight you, just so that you can get into the feel of how it might actually be in a game. And that's going to give you game-like dry running, which I think is extremely important to the success of a team, because you're not always going to be able to play 100 scrims. Sometimes you're going to have to dry run a strat and use it that same game without actually having used it in a scrim. So this is really important. And then I have do it until it feels comfortable. It's really important to make sure that when you're dry running things, you need to make sure that it's intact, right? If you just do it one time and you're like, okay, we're good. Some people might not have timings down. Some people might not realize, oh, I'm actually flashing my teammate by doing this. So you really want to do it and tweak it until it's comfortable. And then lastly, you want to re-dry run old tactics when you haven't used them in a while. This one's a big one. A lot of teams will dry run them once. They'll use them a bunch of matches, and then you have a player break, you have a week off, you have whatever it might be, and you haven't used that strat in a while, and then you try to use it in a match, and then you fluff it. And people are like, well, what if we just dry run it more? And so that's actually the big thing, is if you haven't played a map in a while, instead of just doing scrims that day, maybe set a time aside to dry run, just because the map is coming back into your play, okay? So that's kind of the end of dry running. So going into scrim, in my opinion, there's two types of scrimming, and there's scrimming to win, and there's goal-based scrimming. Now, I know people are going to hear scrimming to win, and they're instantly going to think that's a bad thing. I am not saying that when you scrim to win, you should do anything to win. You should not be that whole mentality of like, by any means necessary. In a match, anything goes. By any means, you should try to win. But what scrimming to win means is you try to react to everything you see in the moment. You don't just call strats to practice those strats. You don't just call defaults to practice those defaults. You call everything practically. So if the team that you're scrimming against, you see them doing X thing, you call your reaction to that play. So for example, on Inferno, a common tactic for CTs to do is to like take banana control, right? They'll smoke deep, they'll molly close, they'll molly deep, okay? And then maybe they'll double need logs, and then they have banana control, sure, okay? So on my team, we know that if one person's towards banana, he shouldn't try to take solo banana control, right? But sometimes people in scrims will decide like, oh, you know what? It's a scrim. I'm just going to try to take solo banana control, and he comes in here and he goes 1-for-1, and it's not really practical. Like, would you do that in a match, right? So if you know for certain that the other team's going to take banana control and you molly and you listen, okay, they're taking banana. I'm going to fall back, guys. I'm giving banana early here. We can retake it later. This is an example of playing reactively. You are reacting to the situation at hand and you're not trying to just force things just because it's a scrim and you're confident, right? You're actually worried about what is happening and playing it by the book and how you would in a match. This will make you more game ready because you're going to be more apt to react to things properly in a game because you scrimmed that way, right? So this, in my opinion, is scrimming to win. This is the idea that you are just making sure that you are playing it just how you would in a match, without the whole desperation scenario. Like in a scrim, you know, if I have a round where like I just need the round and I buy like a Nova and I play long haul, like that could be good like in a match, but in a scrim, it might be better to say, hey, look, sure, we want to practice, but like let's just practice one of our setups in bracket where we have, you know, one guy boosted up here and one guy here, and you do something as a team, right? In matches that are real, sometimes you're going to have hero plays, right? Somebody's going to take a major risk. But I think in scrims, taking those types of risks all the time doesn't really do much for you because you're not going to get punished by every team, and then you're going to think that it works consistently. Does that make sense? So make sure that you're trying to do things within the system, even though you're scrimming to win. So the other way of scrimming is goal-based scrimming, and I think this is actually really important that you do both, and I think goal-based scrimming should probably be a 60-40 split, like 60% of the time you should do goal-based, maybe even 70. And so goal-based scrimming is just setting specific goals and meeting them. So an example, if you need to work on executes, try to get your team into position for the execute practically, and then use them. So what that means in the server is, if I really know that every time we execute B, our pathing's been bad, our trade fragging's been bad, that's what we want to work on, I'm going to say, hey guys, okay, let's start in our default. Okay, let's start in our standard default, work the map, and then once we have control, let's group back to B and do our B execute this round because we really need to work on it. Or before the scrim, I'm going to say, guys, I'm going to call a few of these defaults, and I want to try to end in X strategy so that we can get used to doing it because we've been doing it pretty poorly. And then we go and we try to do it. What some teams do, which I think is a bad thing and creates a bad scrim environment, is they think, oh, we need to work on a B execute. Let's just 5-man B from the start of the round. Maybe they don't get, you know, forced back by the opponents, and they instantly just do a B exec at a minute 30 in the round, and they're just executing B, and the opponents are like, okay, they exec B, but whatever. And then the next round, you do the same thing, and your opponents are like, what the heck? They literally just keep running the same strat over and over again out of spawn. This is annoying. This is stupid. These guys are scrimmers, right? And that's why people get frustrated, because in reality, if you want to practice things, you still should do it game-like, and you should do it how you would do it in a match. If you're just doing straight-up B executes from spawn with 5 people up banana instantly at a minute 30, that isn't practical, because as soon as you play a team that's really good at taking banana control, they are going to destroy you. And then you're not even going to get into the strategy. So it's really not practical to practice like that. And although it might work versus really poor opponents, as soon as you play a team where you've met your match or they have better protocols than you, they're going to punish you for it, and it's going to be too late because it's in a match, right? So it's really important to try to be practical about it, but you still want to set goals and reach those goals, but again, from a practical standpoint, okay? And then I said, if you've been struggling on defaults, default all scrim. That's actually not a bad thing. You could default all scrim long, and then at the end of your default, you should always be calling like a mid round or a late round, right? So you can default and then call late round. Default, call late round, and run no set executes from your playbook. And I think that's an okay way to practice. Sometimes it's really important to default. I think defaulting is 70 to 80% of how the game should be played at the highest level. 70% of the game at least is played out of a default, whether that means you default 70% of the rounds or 70% of a round. But nonetheless, defaulting is super important. And then I said, try to use few things rather than everything. Look, you have 15 rounds per side. If you have 15 rounds on T side and you're including pistol, anti-ecos, etc., you only are going to end up with like 5 to 6 true gun rounds unless you're just dominating your opponent. So really say, okay, we need to work on this, this, and this, and then just cycle through them. And then once you're done with those, then you can try new things if you would like, or move on if you've gotten those reps in. Okay. So lastly, we have review. And again, here I say use your resources. I think it's really important that everybody tries to use their resources. On this list here, I have things that cost money, things that not every team has access to, but I also have things that every team does have access to. So for example, I have prac.com demo reviewer. So they have a prac.com program. If you come here and you pay for it, they have the recorder. It records all 5 POVs and it syncs them together so that when you review, you can see all your opponents in the exact same time frame. This is really good. I believe it's something like $150 a month for the team package. I'm not going to look at it too much in depth. I just wanted to give you guys an idea. This is really good. I've used it at times. The owner of the site, Crisby, was my coach. I'm not sponsored or anything to say this. It genuinely is a really good product. But at the moment, my team has a sponsorship from Refrag, so I'm not using this. The other option is to use Refrag POV Locked Demos. So Refrag is a program that basically, it's just one of the best mods on the market. It basically has a ton of different mods on the server, and it's set up all over the world. And with the competitive tier, you get all these different options. And one of them is the scrim mode. Within the scrim mode, you can actually turn on POV locked demos. What this means is traditionally people don't want demos on in scrims because your opponents, they don't want their stuff leaked. It's not really fair to them, so nobody would really use it. But these guys have created a system in which they can lock the POV to your team only so that you can actually get a physical demo. What's nice about this is not everybody has good enough internet to use prac.com or some of these other routes. So Refrag is really good, and at $15 a month, I think it's pretty good. Keep in mind, however, that at $15 a month, only the person who pays for this tier can actually use the plugin. Everybody else can participate. They can go into the server, go into review, and they can watch the demo back, but they cannot actually use the commands. And then lastly, we have live streaming to Unlisted YouTube, recording POVs through OBS or other recorders, or recording actual POV demos in-game. When you're in-game in Counter-Strike, a lot of people don't know this for some reason, but if you just type record, and then you title it, Stamina's Perfect Practice, it will record a demo. Now, it's not doing it here, it doesn't really matter, but it will record a POV demo for you. This will go to a folder on your computer, and when you go to that folder, you can then open it up in the demo UI. That is the most bare bones way of doing it. Everybody will have the capacity to do that. Doesn't matter if your computer is good or bad. Doesn't matter if you have good internet. Doesn't matter if you have money. Everybody can do that. So that's a good way to review. From there, let's say all 5 people just recorded their actual POV demos. You could go into Discord, create a voice call, and everybody could screen share their POV of the game, and you guys could all like bounce ideas off of each other in review. So that's really good. So these are all the resources. Use them. They are so good. And then lastly, I said review constantly, and then use that review to curve your theory crafting as well as your scrim focus. An example, if you realize that your team is struggling in matches, scrim to win more. If your team is winning a lot of matches, but you don't really think you're doing new things, do goal-based scrimming more and add new ideas. And lastly, you always want to critique when you're doing review, because it's the best time as it's coming from a neutral standpoint. If you're in a scrim and you whiff a shot and you're upset, you're going to be like, God damn it, why did I whiff that shot? And then your teammate goes, you whiffed your shot, and you're going to be like, I know. And then it creates like this tension that nobody needs in a team, right? But if you critique in review, you're creating this environment where everybody should be neutral, assuming that everybody is in the right headspace in that scenario, and they should all be neutral, and you can usually find common ground. So that's the best time to review. So anyways, this is my guide to an effective practice. I think this actually can go all the way up to the tier 1 level, and it can start at the lowest level. I don't think this is anything just for one level. I think North America has a practice problem, and this is just something that I wanted to give a little bit of insight onto. I'm not always perfect with this. I've not always been perfect with this. I think every day is an opportunity to get better and learn, and so I always try to get better and fix the ways that I practice, and maybe even then other people still don't like practicing against me or think that my practice isn't the greatest. So it's always kind of a constant battle to get to a perfect point. You'll never reach perfection. You'll never please everybody. But at the end of the day, I think this is a generally good guideline for almost every single team. So I hope this helps you, and good luck with your practice.